Hi guys, today we are going to be learning how to create an animated GIF. This is a step-by-step tutorial that will follow everything you need to do for exercise 2. We're going to be creating a simple GIF animation that's a travel advertisement. I'm going to show you an example. This is how it looks. The animation simply moves through a scene of a beach. A tagline, "Find Yourself," appears at the top, fades in. The Expedia logo fades in at the bottom and then fades out, and then a "Start Now" button appears at the bottom. Then the animation loops continuously. We're going to create this in Photoshop. I'm specifically using CS6. You can use CS5, even CS4 to create it this way. First, let's talk about how to set up our files. You can see that I've created a folder, Exercise 2 GIF. And inside the folder, there's several things. First, there's an Images folder. The Images folder contains all the images I need to create my animated GIF. There's a beach JPEG of the background image, the button "Start Now," and the Expedia logo. Both the button and the Expedia logo are PNG files so that they can have transparent backgrounds when I import the file. Also, you'll have my finished GIF file, which you won't have until you finish creating it, and I have a PSD file that contains all my layers for this exercise. You can see it in the background here. This is what it looks like. I have 6 or 7 layers, and then I have a timeline, a frame timeline at the bottom that spans about 46 frames. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new document. We're going to go to File, New, and we want to change the width and the height to 250 by 250 pixels. Our resolution should be 72 pixels per inch, RGB color mode, and our background contents can be white, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and name my file. You should use your name, Exercise 2. So in my case, it'll be Megan Carey _ Exercise 2. We have a blank canvas here. You can see at the bottom that the timeline is already open. However, if it's not open for you, you just go to Window, Timeline. And at the bottom it gives you several options. You can either create a frame animation or a video timeline. We want to create a frame animation, and just click on Create Frame Animation. So you can see the difference here. While we had 46 frames on the already complete file, we have just 1 here. Let's go back to the other one. You can see. The first thing we're going to do is start building our layers in the order that we want to reveal our animation. The first thing I'm going to do is create a layer and fill it with a blue teal color. I'm going to do this because I want the background image to fade in slightly. So I'm just going to choose a color. This is pretty close to what I want. You could have any color that you wish. You don't have to have a color, except for this exercise. And just click OK and fill it. The next thing I'm going to do is open my folder with my images and select the beach JPEG. I'm going to make it fill the background, the frame. And then I want to set it up so it's slightly offset because I want my animation to come in from the side, almost like a camera is panning a view. So here we are. So how do we make it come in from the side? Well, it's pretty simple, and it's all about having your layers in the right position. Let's duplicate our beach layer in the layers panel, beach copy, and we want to have it in the exact same position that it was in before. Next, we want to add our type, layer. So I'm going to go ahead and open my character palette and create a text box at the top in the general position that we would like our text to be in. I'm going to nudge that down just a bit in a minute. And type "Find Yourself," which is our tagline. Now it's kind of hard to read on this frame, but the position of the beach is going to change, so don't worry too much about it right now. I'm just going to add a drop shadow to that "Find Yourself" text as well. And I'm going to change the distance to 1 and the size to 1 just so it's not quite as strong. I've used Baskerville Semi-Bold in a light blue color, 24-point type, and I've tracked it out to 75 just to give it a little bit of space between the letters so it's easier to read on the screen. Also, we have this anti-aliasing panel in the characters palette, and you may not have ever used it before. It's called Set the Anti-Aliasing Method. And what that does is add different options to make text easier to read on the screen. I have it set to smooth, and what that does is slightly blur the edges. You can also use sharp, crisp, strong, and this can often make the text pixelate a little bit, have a jagged edge. So I want to make sure it's set on smooth. Next, I'm going to add my Expedia logo. So I'm going to go into Images and find my Expedia logo PNG with its transparent background and place it into the file. I know that I'm going to want it into the lower right corner. I can't quite see the exact position of the beach background now. I could create a fake layer where I could see where it's going to go and then delete it, but I have a general idea of where it's going. And next, I'm going to turn that off for a second and add the button in the same position. It's in my Images folder again, button PNG. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller and just move it to that bottom right corner where the logo was before. Place and accept the transformation. Apply it. And now we have all the layers that we need to have. We can actually go ahead and hide everything but the blue background, because that's what we're going to start with. So now the fun part begins. We actually start our animation. First thing we want to do is fade in from this blue to the beach background. So I'm going to create a new layer in my timeline. It looks just like the layers, new layer button in our layer palette. Click it, and you can see these 2 layers have now appeared, 2 frames. Your animation may be set on 1 second, it may be set on no delay. Double check it. Whatever it's set on, make sure that it's set on 0.05 seconds. You can change that by clicking the drop down menu, clicking other, and setting the delay to 0.05 seconds. In general, this whole animation is going to be 0.05 seconds. If it ever gets off, you can easily select the layer or multiple layers by shift clicking and change that. At the end, we're going to slightly adjust some of the layers just to give them a slight pause. But for now, just use 0.05 as a general guide. So on the second layer that I've created, I'm going to turn on the first beach layer. And now we're going to make it fade in. It is as simple as selecting frame 1 and frame 2, shift clicking to select, and then coming down to the bottom of our timeline panel and choosing Tween. Tween's animation frames. A tween actually creates extra frames between your two frames where changes occur in the animation. It's almost like creating a stop motion video or watching Disney animate Mickey Mouse with slight movements. The computer's actually going through an algorithm and figuring out how many changes need to occur in the timeline you've set to make your animation happen. So we've selected our 2 frames. The second one shows what we want it to end up looking like, and we are going to let it add 5 frames in between. We want it to tween from our selection, from all layers selected, and I'm just going to leave everything checked here and click OK. Now you can see it's created these 5 extra frames and it's fading in the opacity. We can choose the play button to preview. Mine was set on forever. A constant loop. You can change it to once if you want to just get an idea of how it looks just one time. Next, I want the actual beach to move the camera to pan across. So again, I'm going to create a new frame or layer in my timeline. And on this new layer that I've created, or frame 8, I'm going to turn on the beach copy layer in our layers panel. It looks exactly like the one underneath it, but this is the one we're going to actually move. I'm going to copy this frame again. In animation, you do a lot of frame copying. It's just part of motion design. Copy it again by choosing the new frame or layered option in the timeline. And now I'm actually going to move the image across. Just shift select and move it to the right. And let it go where we want it to end, which was right at the end of the image. And then we are going to select the 2 frames, 8 and 9, that we've created, and we are going to tween it again. Select tween, and we are going to add 10 frames this time, and only change the position. Make sure opacity and effects aren't checked. It shouldn't actually affect anything, but it's just good policy to not select both. And then say OK. So now you can see that we've added our 10 frames and the image is panning across, just like we wanted it to. Our next step is to add the text at the top. So once again, we are going to create a new frame or layer in our timeline. Duplicate the selected frame. For me, that becomes frame 20. And then I am going to turn on the type layer. Find yourself. We actually want our type to fade in, just like we wanted the beach image to fade in at the beginning. So we're going to select our no type frame and our type frame, 19 and 20 for me, and tween it again. Let's go back to our 5 frames. We don't need as long of an animation. And we are going to use all layers again, and this time we're going to just add all the parameters just in case. Select OK, and you can now see that our Find Yourself is fading in, just like we wanted it to. We only have two more things to add. That's our logo and our button. So, new frame in our timeline, and we are going to turn on the Expedia logo layer. We actually want to just apply the same effect that we did to the Find Yourself text to the logo and really to the button. So we are going to simply select the Expedia logo frame and the frame before it, tween it again, 5 frames, all the parameters selected, and click OK. As we move through our frames, we can see that it has faded in. Next, we need to actually fade it out so we can fade in our button. Now remember, you could bring your logo in from the side and fade it in. You could bring it in from the top. You don't have to fade it in at all, except for the purposes of this exercise. With your GIF for your project, you can do a lot, but a limited number of things that you can do with the effects in Photoshop. To fade it out, we need to create another frame in our timeline. And this time, instead of turning on a layer, we're going to turn off the Expedia logo frame. Simply select both layers and fade it out by tweening it. Frames to add, 5. Parameters, 5. Click OK. So you can now go back and see how it faded in, and it immediately started fading out. Now if you want to add a little extra time where the logo sits on the screen for a minute, or really 1/10 of a second, you can go back and add an extra frame, duplicate it. I added a frame between 31 and 32, and I'm going to change my length that it is on the screen, 31, to 1 second. It just lets it sit there for just a hair's breadth of a second to give us a little brain recognition. Let's go ahead and preview using the play button in our timeline just to see our animation up to this point. Could you see in the bottom where it stopped for just a second? Just a slight pause. Only one thing left to do, and that's add our button. Again, duplicate our frame. That's frame 39 for me now. Could be 40, could be 37 for you. It depends on your exact frame number that you've created. Now I'm going to turn on my button and simply select the 2 frames, 38 and 39, and create another tween with 5 frames and our parameters selected. And it is fading in just like every other time before. Now at the end of our animation, I kind of want the button to sit there just like we had the Expedia logo sit there. I'm actually going to let it sit there for 2 seconds. Let's preview that. That pause just gives people actually time to think about clicking on it. And we talked about in class about adding a loop to our animation. I think looping it is a good idea because you don't know how many times people are going to actually look or not look. It gives them something in the corner of their eye to go back to. That way they can also see the logo again for what they're actually looking at. So I'm going to go back to where it says once in the timeline palette and change it to forever. We can preview that and see the loop. That's it. We've created our animation. Let's stop that. And at this point, which really before this point, you should have made sure to save your document. File, save, or save as a PSD. Just going to save over the one I had already created, but for you, it might be your first time saving your PSD. Again, it should be your name and exercise 2. And you want to save a PSD because you want these layers. You want to be able to go back and change something if you need to. Just click save and OK. Now the PSD file will not actually animate in a browser, so you need to make your GIF file. And it's very simple. You just go to File, Save for Web, and you want to make sure you have GIF selected, not JPEG or PNG, in the right menu. You can see that we are creating a 250 by 250 pixel GIF. You can see that our loop is on forever, just like we set it to. You could change it from this menu too. And we are going to save it. And I'm going to save over the GIF I saved before. Save. Now let's preview it in our browser, because this gives us the best idea of what it will actually look like on the web. I'm going to drag it into Firefox, and it will open in a preview. You can see our animation fades in from the blue screen, the camera pans, the Find Yourself text appears, the Expedia logo appears and pauses for a second, and then our Start Now button appears. And it's on an infinite loop. You can preview it in Firefox, Chrome, Safari. All of them will let you see it. And this just gives you a better idea of what it's going to look like. And that's it. You've created your animated GIF. If you have trouble, let me know. It's actually a pretty simple process because there's not a lot of options that you can make. The biggest problem is turning on layers and turning off layers that you didn't mean to have on during your animation. So if that happens, just stop, take a deep breath. You might need to delete some frames and go back. It's pretty easy to start over again. Keep your files, your folder organized, keep your layers organized, and that will help.